Okay, this is part 3 of our complete tour of the Insert tab in Excel. And we've already looked at all of these sections, but now we're going to get into charts. We're going to look at tours, sparklines, filters, links, text, and symbols. So let's jump right into charts and get started. And we can do recommended charts. And this is just going to give you ideas for how you could potentially chart out your information. You can also go to all charts and you can look for different styles of charts. Depending on how you have your information set up, Excel may or may not find a good or useful chart that it recommends. Okay? But that's recommended charts, and then of course you can go and pick from your own charts. And let's just take a look at a pie chart. So this pie chart is pulling from the quantity of each material. So obviously this big yellow one is our flooring, because there are 400 pieces of flooring or 400 square feet of flooring. So that's not a very relevant chart, but you could go to the filters here and say that you want to go by the total instead. Click apply, close that, and now you can see it's a little bit more relevant. So it's looking at our flooring and saying, well, our flooring is $2,400. It's the most expensive item, so it's the biggest piece of the pie. The next expensive item is cabinets, and the orange one here is cabinets. And you can change the way these are labeled and everything, but that's just a kind of quick way to create charts. You can change the styles over here just by clicking on buttons. Just whatever suits your preferences. You can change colors, you can add elements to it, modify the layout. You can swap the axis to put the rows where the columns are and the columns where the rows are. That doesn't apply to a pie chart, but that works with bar charts and things. Change your chart type or move your chart. Okay, so that's your design tab under charts, and then you have your format tab. All of this looks familiar. You can just change colors, change fonts, and so on. Okay, let's get out of the charts just by deleting that and go back to insert. Okay, that takes care of charts. Maps. We're actually going to use a different example for this, and I'll just tab over to this one. Yeah, there it is. This is just a list of places that I'd like to visit, the city, the country, and the priority of which one's the most important. And you can map this out just by going to the maps. Click on that. And it's just a version of a chart, really. But it just gives you a visual of those areas. So they're all in Europe. So it shows you that, for instance, the Czech Republic is high on the list. It shows you that Portugal is high on the list just by a visual representation of the data. Okay, we'll delete out of that, go back to insert. So that's maps. Pivot chart, we already know how to do pivot charts, but you can use this button here to insert one, and this will give you the option of doing a pivot chart or a chart and a table at the same time. And then 3D maps, I have a section on how to do 3D maps, so we won't go into that, but you can create a 3D map of the world that's, well, three-dimensional, and it works really well when you use things that have like cities or countries and some sort of data to be represented by the map. Okay, next let's talk about sparklines. We're going to jump over into a different workbook for that. In this workbook I have our familiar sales reps, and I have the months of the year, January through December, and then I have their sales numbers for each month. And we're just going to use this data to create a sparkline. The thing about sparklines is you place them at the end of a row of data, and it has to be some sort of data that shows a trend over time. So the way we do it is we select the data, then we click on sparkline. It asks us to choose the data we want. We've already selected that. And then we choose where we want to put the sparkline. We just click there, click OK, and it creates this little mini chart with a line graph. We can click on that and drag it down, and that'll create a little line chart for each of our sales reps. We can expand this out a little bit if we want. And you can see that once we've created these spark lines, we have a new design tab here that has a bunch of more options. So here we can edit the data. This would be editing where your data is located. You can change it between a line, a column, or a win-loss chart. So we can go to columns. You can see it represents it similarly, but just using columns. Go back to our lines for now. You can have little markers on the high point. See, that puts little red markers on the high points for each rep, and then you can do low points as well. So that shows you basically their worst sales month and their best sales month. You can show negative points, but we don't have any negative numbers here. Although if we did, we could just change one of these to a negative and then go back to our, let's see, we gotta click on our Spark charts again, go back to design. Now we can show negative points. You can mark the first point and the last point, and then you can do markers for every change or every data point, which in this case is our months. We'll take off the markers for every one of them because that gets a little busy. And then we can go to our styles, and you can do different colors for the high points, low points, beginning and end. So we can do something like this. So now your beginning and end are marked in yellow, your high point is marked in green, and your low point is marked in red. You can change your marker colors, you can change the high point color, low point color, etc. So these are basically just overall styles, and these are ways to change individual elements of that style. You can change your axis, and down here, this is an important point when it comes to columns. Let me show you this. If you have columns selected here, let's go ahead and make these a little bit bigger so we can see them. There we go. Okay, you'll notice that the high points on these are all at the top of the screen, or I should say the cell, but they're not really relative to each other, which is a problem because it's a little bit misleading. So what we'd want to do is go to our design tab, go to axis, and say our minimum and maximum value we want to be the same for all spark lines instead of automatic for each spark line. So if we click on that, and for that, then you can see that they're relative to each other now. And I can give you an even better example. If we take this data, copy it, put it into the higher range here, you'll see that now this one, none of the values actually hit the top. You'll also notice that these are all raised up because of this one negative value. So let's also go in and change that. Take away the negative to make it a little more clear. And now you can see it better. So some of these values, this value is reaching the top of the cell, and these values are only coming about halfway up the cell. So all of these charts are now relative to each other rather than being just relative to themselves. And the cool thing about spark lines is they just allow you to visually represent the data that you have in a spreadsheet, and you can just pick out trends for individual sales reps rather than having to look at all of this put into one big chart. And a good example would be this one right here. If you look at all of these, you can see a general upward trend going through the end of the year. So it's safe to assume that September, October, November, December have strong sales months, and most of the reps are following that trend. But then you look at this guy right here, and you can see that his just drops off here. So that's a good visual indicator of something maybe being wrong. And so you can then go in and look at some of the data and see that these months are critically low compared to these other reps. And that's the kind of data that can give you valuable insight, which is one of the main purposes of using Excel. For instance, maybe this company started a training program somewhere in July or August that boosted the sales of most of these reps. But maybe Marcy didn't get in on that training, which is why hers dropped off, because she wasn't trained up on new market trends or sales techniques that were necessary in the market. So then that would be a good indicator that you need to go back and get Marcy some training. So that's kind of a long-winded explanation about Spark charts, but they are cool and they are useful for representing data and trends along a row of data. Okay, so that's Spark charts or Spark lines. We could do a slicer if we turn this into a table. Go back to our insert tab, do slicer. We can do a slicer based on our sales reps. Click OK. If we just want to see Bob's sales, click there, and there we go. Okay, we'll clear that out and delete the slicer. Go back to insert. We've already looked at a timeline. That's similar to a slicer, but it allows you to sort the data based on dates specifically. Okay, let's talk about links for a minute. There are basically two types of links that I want to show you. The first type is if you just had a cell selected that linked out to a website. It's a hyperlink. The second one is if you had a cell selected that you can click on, it would take you to another sheet in Excel. So for instance, let's go to our kitchen remodel worksheet real quick. Let's say that we wanted to have a link right there that takes us to Bob's sales on our other sheet. We just go ahead and do the drop down on link, click insert link. So this is showing the text that we want to display, and we're just going to have this say Bob's sales. And then we reference the cell reference, and he happens to be at A6, I believe. And then you can select a place in this Excel workbook. So we're going to go to sheet 1, which is where Bob's sales are, and that's really it. We can also add a screen tip by just typing whatever you want in there. So let's say click here to see Bob's sales. Actually, sales numbers. Okay, click OK, and then we click OK here, and it created a link for us. Now when I hover over this, it gives us the little screen tip. See, click here to see Bob's sales numbers, and if I click on it, then it takes us over to the chart. And I made a mistake, and I thought that Bob was on number 6, but he's on number 2. So let's fix that real quick. We just go in here, right click, we click on edit hyperlink, and he was on A2, right? So we click A2, click OK, and notice how there's a little hand pointing at it. That means it's a link. Click on the link, and now our cell selection jumped to cell A2. Okay? So that's how to do a link within a document. You can also just do a link outward. Go to insert link. So that's the place in this document you can do existing file or web page, create a new document, or to an email address. But we're going to do a web page, and let's say we just want it to go to Google. Put that there, type the address www.google.com, and it pre-populated it because it recognizes it. Click OK, and now when you click on this, it'll just take you to Google. And notice this little screen tip here where it says click once to follow, click and hold to select this cell. So that's one of the things that's a little tricky about cells with hyperlinks is they're hard to select on. But so if you click this once, it'll go to Google. If you click and hold it, then it'll put you into the cell. We should be able to do the same with Bob. See, if I hold it, and then when I release, it doesn't take me where the hyperlink wants to go. But if I just click it once, then it takes me where the hyperlink wants to go. Okay? Drop back to our kitchen remodel cost worksheet, and I'll go ahead and delete those. So those are links. You can also insert text into your document. You have quite a few options. You can do a text box. You can create headers and footers for each page. You can put word art in there. And I'll just give you an example of that. It's basically just fancy lettering. You can put a signature line into your documents, or you can add objects, and this is all kinds of different things. You can put PowerPoint presentations in there. You can put Word documents embedded right into your Excel spreadsheets and so forth. Okay, but going back to that, the more simple versions of the text is a text box, and when you click that, then you left click and drag, and it puts a text box in there, and you can just say hello world, and then you have a text box. Okay, and to delete that, you have to get your 4-point arrow and click right on the whole box to select it, and then click delete. Okay, back to insert. So that's a text box. Word art, you can just click on and pick a fancy word style, and same thing. If we type hello world and click out of it, there it is. Then of course you can go back into there, and you have a format tools, so you can change the text, lettering. Oops, I have to select the whole thing to do that. Like so. You can change the colors, and there you go. Okay, again, we click on the edge of that and we can delete it. Go back to insert. That's text. And let's insert some symbols. We have two options. You can go to the regular symbols. This is just a bunch of options for symbols that you can put into your Excel file. So if we want a copyright symbol in a cell, we click insert, close this, and there it is. So if I want to say copyright Steve McDonald, there we go, I've got a symbol in there. Okay. Going back to symbols, we have equations as well. And if we use our drop down, there are some predefined equations that you can use, and you can scroll down to do more. Or you can go to ink equations too right here, which is kind of cool. So you can actually write with your mouse in this area. So if I wanted to write E equals MC squared. Oops, I didn't do a very good job of it. So you can go like this. You can go select and correct. Select that area. And I wanted this version. So I go ahead and actually I wanted lowercase c. So I click that and it fixes it for me because it didn't read it quite right. Or you can go erase, and you can erase those. Go back to writing and write it more clearly. And it understood it better that time. So then that's our equation. You just click insert, and you can see it popped our equation into Excel. Okay. And with your equations, you also have a format tab, which gives you all of these options, and you have a design tab. So you have all kinds of options for putting symbols in and different structures of equations over here. You can go to your ink equation tool there, and so on. Okay, so that wraps it up for our insert tab. We've covered tables, we've covered illustrations, where to find your add-ins, charts, tours, sparklines, filters, links, text, and symbols.